It all started with the wind. When you think of World War II, you probably picture roaring fighter planes, thundering bombs, screaming sirens, and maybe some guy in a helmet yelling over a crackling radio. But what if I told you there was once a Japanese attack on America that involved absolutely none of that? No pilots, no tanks, no soldiers, just wind. Yeah, Japan once tried to bomb the United States using nothing but the jet stream and a bunch of balloons, and it actually worked better than anyone expected. Let me tell you how it all went down. In late 1944, Japan was in a tight spot. The tides of war were turning. American forces were creeping closer to the Pacific. Japan knew a full-blown counterattack was nearly impossible. The U.S. mainland was 8,000 kilometers away. Airplanes couldn't fly that far. Submarines, too risky. Secret ninja assassins? Okay, now you're just watching anime. But one scientist, some genius insane hybrid, had an idea. What if we send bombs to America using wind? Cue silence in the meeting room. Then everyone probably turned slowly and said, "You good, bro?" The idea wasn't just madness, it was science. Japan had discovered the jet stream, a powerful current of wind flowing high above the Pacific Ocean, moving at speeds of 200 to 300 kilometers per hour. If they could launch something into that wind, it could reach North America in about 3 to 5 days. So they created Fugo, or windship weapons. These were massive paper balloons, over 10 meters tall, handmade from traditional Japanese washi paper. Each carried a payload of bombs and an automated altitude control system. Yes, you heard that right. A DIY floating death machine made of paper with tech in it. It was like someone combined origami with an engineering degree and said, "Let's go." The balloons would ride the jet stream, drifting across the Pacific. If they got too low, a sensor would drop sandbags to make them rise. Too high, a valve would release hydrogen to bring them down. When the balloon reached American territory, a timer would release the bombs. No pilot, no control, just wind, science, and a whole lot of hope. If they had attached soy sauce and sushi to it, this would have been the first intercontinental bento box. Between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan launched about 9,000 Fugo balloons. They expected only a fraction to make it, and they were right. Roughly 300 to 600 were actually found in the US and Canada. Some landed in forests, some drifted into cities. One exploded in Oregon, starting a forest fire. Another tragically killed 6 people. The US military was shocked. They had no idea these things were even possible, and so they panicked quietly. They issued a full media blackout. No newspaper could report on the balloons. Why? Because they didn't want Japan to know it was working. Because no one talked about it. The media was silenced. The military covered it up. People who saw the balloons thought they were just party decorations gone rogue. Some folks even brought them home like, "Ah, what a cute giant balloon." Yeah, turns out it was full of explosives. One family found out the hard way. Japan sent 9,000 balloons. Around 6% actually made it across the ocean. Several exploded. At least one caused casualties. And America was caught completely off guard. This wasn't just a gimmick. It was the first intercontinental weapon system in human history, and it was made of paper. Let that sink in. People say words can be weapons, but Japan was out here saying, "Hold my washi paper." Episode 2, the boom no one was ready for. After Japan launched over 9,000 balloon bombs into the sky, most people probably thought, yeah, they probably just floated off into nothing. But nope. Some made it. Some got stuck in trees. And one of them exploded. And that one changed everything. What was Japan even trying to do? Their goal wasn't to destroy cities. It was to cause chaos, start forest fires, and force the U.S. to panic. If they could get just a few of these things to start wildfires, then America would have to send resources away from the war to fight nature. This idea even had a nickname, Operation Forest Fire, which honestly sounds more like a barbecue sauce than a military operation. Did it work? Actually, kinda. Some Fugo balloons did start forest fires, especially in Oregon. But plot twist, the winter that year brought heavy snow and rain. So instead of bursting into flames, many balloons just landed in soft snow, in lakes, or got tangled in trees and hung there like spooky, explosive Christmas ornaments. Still, The one that did go off on May 5th, 1945, a small group of people were picnicking near the town of Bly, Oregon. A minister named Archie Mitchell had brought his wife and 5 kids from his church to enjoy the fresh mountain air. While he parked the car, the others wandered off into the woods. Then a loud explosion shook the ground. All 6 of them were killed instantly. What happened? They had stumbled across a Fugo balloon that had landed months earlier and gotten stuck in a tree. For weeks, it sat there quietly, unnoticed, until that day when someone unknowingly triggered the bomb. Archie Mitchell was the only survivor. He'd stayed far enough from the blast, and just like that, he became the first and only eyewitness to a fatal Japanese balloon bomb attack on U.S. soil. What did the U.S. government do? Same thing they'd been doing: silence. The U.S. military didn't want Japan to know that their plan had worked, even just once. If word got out, Japan might ramp up the attacks. So even though 6 innocent civilians had died, including 5 children, there were no headlines, no news reports, no public warnings. It was quieter than your group chat after someone says, "I have something to say," and then never types again. The truth came out. But way later, only after the war ended, did the government release information about Fugo. By then, the story had already faded into the background. The Bly incident was written into history books, but quietly, no fanfare, no outrage, just a strange footnote in a massive war. It's one of the most tragic, least talked about attacks ever to happen on American soil. Episode 3: The Bombs Nobody Reported and the Silence That Followed. So, we've seen how Japan launched nearly 9,000 bomb-laden balloons into the sky, and how one of them actually exploded and took innocent lives on American soil. But here's the weirdest part. Why has no one ever really heard about it? No documentaries, no history class coverage. Heck, some Americans living in the towns where they landed didn't even know this happened. That's because while Japan was floating bombs across the ocean, the U.S. was launching a war of silence. That's right, this was a psychological war, and the battlefield wasn't in the sky, it was in the headlines, or more accurately, in the lack of them. From the very beginning, the U.S. military issued a total media blackout. They ordered newspapers: if you report anything about strange explosions, mysterious balloons, or anything that sounds remotely weird in the woods, don't. Why? Because they didn't want Japan to know it was working. Imagine you're the one launching the attacks. If you start seeing newspaper headlines like "Forest Fire Sparked by Mystery Balloon" or "Deadly Blast in Oregon Linked to Japan," what would you do? Exactly. You'd send more. That's what the U.S. wanted to avoid at all costs. Even after 6 civilians were killed, including 5 children, the American government kept it quiet. There were no front pages, no breaking news, just silence. The kind of silence you get in a group chat when someone says, "I have something to say," and then goes offline for 5 hours. So what did they do instead? The government quietly set up classified balloon recovery teams. They sent special crews, often under the radar, to search forests, collect balloon fragments, and investigate strange fires without anyone noticing. These weren't soldiers in tanks. They were guys in pickup trucks crawling around in snow, looking for bits of washi paper. Because, yes, the bombs were made of hand-glued Japanese rice paper, and they were lethal if touched. If a balloon landed and no one found it in time, well, let's just say the consequences weren't pretty. One small town even had a case where a kid dragged a fallen balloon home. His grandma, thinking it was cute, tied it up in the backyard like lawn decor. The next day, the army showed up and freaked out. Turns out, the cute decoration was still live. Thankfully, that one didn't go off. But it could have. So yeah, that's the level of danger they were hiding. And here's the thing. The plan worked. Because Japan never knew if their balloons made it or not. From their perspective, it was like throwing a message in a bottle into the ocean and never hearing anything back. Some scientists in Japan actually started to wonder, maybe this whole thing failed? Meanwhile, in America, some balloons were literally landing in schoolyards. It was working. They just weren't saying anything. That's what makes this story so haunting. It's not just the bombs. It's the silence around them that made the whole thing scarier. Japan wanted panic. Instead, they got a wall of nothing, and that's what broke the momentum of the campaign. Ta yu promarai ke pim male wa authon forma. Leo laoจะไปต่อกับช่วงท้ายสุดของโปรเจกต์นี้กับความจริงที่ญี่ปุ่น Final episode, The Wind That Faded. By early 1945, Japan had already launched thousands of Fugo balloon bombs into the sky, handcrafted from paper, filled with hydrogen, equipped with barometric sensors and explosives, designed to float silently across the Pacific and rain destruction on North America. They called it a weapon, but it was more like a whisper of war. Back in Japan, military officers waited anxiously for news. Did it work? Did the bombs reach America? Did even one cause real damage? But the answer they kept getting was silence. Nothing on the radio, no intelligence reports, no confirmation that any of the balloons even landed. They assumed the worst, that the plan had failed. So in April 1945, just months before the end of World War II, Japan officially ended the Fugo campaign. All that effort, all that secrecy, all that floating paper, gone. But what they didn't know was that they were wrong. Fugo actually worked. Just quietly, out of 9,000 balloons, hundreds made it. Some crashed in forests. Some started fires. One caused a deadly explosion in Oregon, killing 5 children and a pregnant woman. The U.S. military knew. They recovered wreckage. They tracked impact sites. They even had secret teams traveling through the woods, picking up fragments before civilians could find them. But none of this made the news. Why? Because the government feared that if Japan knew the bombs were landing, they'd send more. So they created a weaponized kind of silence, a blackout stronger than steel. A war without words. This was more than a cover-up. It was psychological warfare. Fugo was designed to scare America, to make people panic, to light wildfires and force the military to scramble. But instead of reacting with fear, the U.S. reacted with nothing. And that silence killed the campaign. Back in Japan, without data, the scientists in charge of Fugo began doubting themselves. One general even said, perhaps the stream was wrong, or the gods did not guide the wind. Ironically, it had worked better than they ever imagined. The balloons had reached targets across the western U.S., some as far east as Michigan. They even crossed into Canada and Mexico. But without feedback, Japan shut it all down, thinking it had been pointless. After the war, when World War II ended and Japan surrendered in August 1945, the U.S. government finally lifted the veil. The media ran stories about strange balloon bombs. Families who'd kept quiet were allowed to speak. Scientists began analyzing fragments. Historians pieced together the truth. And slowly, the world learned that America had in fact been attacked by a quiet floating army made of rice paper and wind. It wasn't loud. It wasn't high tech. But it was real. And for a few brief months, it terrified a continent without most people even knowing. What made it fail? Not the balloons, not the design, not the idea. What made Fugo fail was that it succeeded silently. It's one of the few moments in history where a military campaign collapsed, not because it didn't work, but because it worked too quietly to be noticed. Final reflection. The Fugo story isn't just about wartime desperation or clever engineering. It's about information, about what happens when noise becomes a weapon and when silence becomes stronger than bombs. Japan launched paper into the sky. America launched silence back. And in that strange, invisible battle, silence won.